about writing poetry and not getting laid.
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay, so this is going to be really fucking terrible. I'm apologizing in advance. Right, so as some of you may know, I have a book coming out in September. It's going to be called Glamourpuss, very appropriate. Yeah, look at my glamorous outfit. And so, in the great tradition of me really promoting the things I do well, I'm not going to read you anything from it. Because after I finally finalized this book manuscript, I got really sad about all the really shitty poetry I wrote in my 20s that wasn't making it into the book because it would make no sense to anyone except for me. So I made this zine of all of the poetry I wrote in my 20s that will make no sense to anybody except for me. It's called The Dance with the Joys of This World. And I kind of felt like I wanted to read some of this really terrible, embarrassing poetry, but the problem was it would make no sense to anybody except me. So what I decided to do was to kind of read a set of poems from it and intersperse them with a story of like what the fuck was actually going on that I thought I was talking about. This set of poems, there's 10 of them, I think. I wrote them, I started writing them in 2007. I was 25, I guess they've been out about like 6 years. I'd recently had what used to be called a nervous breakdown, and quit working in the wine trade in London, and kind of, been a mess for a bit, and then got onto a PhD program and moved to Sheffield, which is a kind of ex-industrial city in the north of England, that is in the middle of this very, very beautiful area of countryside called the Peak District. Lots of hills and rivers, very, very beautiful. I was doing a PhD in 20th century American literature, which turned out to be a problem because I quickly realized that I hated 20th century American literature. So I started walking in the hills a lot. I would leave the city and go and walk in the hills, and I started reading a lot of 17th century English mock pastoral poetry. People like the Earl of Rochester, Aphra Behn, those kind of people. Kind of Cod Virgilian, Cod Theocriton. And then, as I was reading such a lot of it, I decided I was going to try and write some myself. This felt like an interesting challenge. I think I was interested in it because I felt like, both as a person generally in Sheffield, but also particularly as like a trans person in Sheffield, or even really in the world, kind of out of place. Like, Sheffield had one gay building. The gay building had 3 floors. On the ground floor, there was a gay bar. On the middle floor, there was a gay nightclub. On the top floor, there was a lesbian cocktail bar with pool tables. They were all kind of huddled together for safety. When you went the first time, they took a photo of you. If you didn't gay bash anyone and came back, you got a membership card, and then you were allowed in without any problems. It was that kind of place. It was called Dempsey's. There were never any other trans people there. So putting a trans speaker into the even more unlikely landscape of English imitations, of Roman imitations, of Greek imitations of shepherds, was kind of a way to throw this weirdness into relief. It was a joke. It was meant to be a joke. I envisaged reading it in a toga. I've never read it before. I'm sorry I'm not wearing a toga. And so, yeah, I'm going to start reading some of these to you and tell you about what was happening while I wrote them. So here's the first one. This is called The Poet Comes to Arcadia in the Spring. Birdsong fills my ears. Step by step with care I falter down the slope. Sunbeams come and go. I note these tiny flowers growing everywhere, red and pink and white with names I do not know. Like them, I think, I open in the gentle air. I wintered in the city, huddling about below the useless eaves and dodging bikes, lugging despair between the bars through the crowds in sleet and snow. Tall buildings, narrow streets, I'd come away to spend some seasons in Arcadia, where groves and streams run down to fertile fields on the valley floor, and gods and shepherds still play pipes, here to suspend my weary disbeliefs, indulge in rural dreams, and hope to see those things that now are seen no more. Weary disbeliefs. I was 25. Anyway. I was interested, I guess, in this kind of question of hope at this point. I'd slept with kind of a lot of guys for kind of a few years, but I'd never really been in a relationship in my whole life. I didn't really want to be in a relationship with any of these men, and they didn't really want to be in one with me, at least, not in public. But recently I'd come to a staggering conclusion. I'd decided I was going to be a lesbian. And I'd also figured out how to have orgasms, at least by myself. So, it felt like things were really taking a turn for the better. I was determined sex and love were going to have a place in my life. The muse prompts her to sing of desire. I never pledged myself servant to you, Venus, but see what trials I endure. Perhaps I stop to have a drink or two. My thoughts will run to love, and I am sure to see some country girl go walking past, with tanned and sandaled feet and hair entwined with blossoms. All the girls around here walk so fast. Last time I saw a vision of this kind, I sat until my flask, like me, was drunk, then wandered off again, singing, her blind and full of longing through the woods, where, sunk in dreams, I walked into an apple bough, hard, showering half-ripe fruit on the ground, and bringing up a bruise, a lover's mark on my brow. Well then, Venus, all right. I guess I am your poet now. So, I lived in Sheffield, I was lonely, I walked around the Peak District, and I tried to work out what kind of sexual fantasy could possibly have me in it. How I could possibly have desire and not be a boy. What would sex with someone like me in it be like? How could I ever be desirable, or even intelligible? I signed up for a bunch of online dating services. No one ever messaged me. I was much too proud to message anyone. Okay, I did message one woman. She never replied. She was too busy rock climbing. I hung out on the lesbian floor of the gay building by myself wearing a shirt, but no one said hello. Once I tried to play pool. I was terrible at it. Nothing happens. Summer, lazy summer, has climbed the sky. Flowers open and honeybees fly. Busy breeding. The rabbits have already popped out 2 litters. Now the first is mating too. Through with growing. The warm air, thick with pollen, does not make the fish who frisk in the cool deep lake keen on sleeping. But I hardly even swim. I lie picking daisies, giving odd sighs, and dozing. A girl joined my PhD program. She had long red hair. She was dating a guy, but I happened to let on to her that maybe I was into girls, and she started to flirt with me. She told me she was bisexual, talked about her femme identity. We went out drinking a bunch of times. We got really drunk. It kind of seemed to be in the air that maybe we might kiss, or even have an affair. That would be exciting. She talked about how she wanted an open relationship. I told her I was trans, and I could see something move in her eyes. She told me, shortly after, that she decided she definitely couldn't go outside her primary pairing. It wouldn't be right. I said I totally understood. She is visited by Morpheus. Arduous visions fill my sleeping head. I seem to wander headlong through forests so dark I cannot trust my eyes. Do I dream of you, beloved, I have not seen and would not recognize? Or is that a bush? Are those leaves or hair? I turn and follow every sound. Perhaps the owl calls out your unknown name. You're always to be found elsewhere. The shifting shadows are always the same. These nights are not much different from my days. I live my dreams. I hardly know whether it's clouds or if it is the sun that's in the sky. I go my ways, crying aloud for love, and finding none. I went to London to see Prince with some friends. It was great, we got really high. An old friend, well, I thought she was an old friend, I was only 25, remember, came up while we were dancing afterwards, really high, and tried to kiss me. I was totally unprepared. I freaked out and ran away. But on the train the next day, going up north, she lived in Manchester, we talked and held hands a little tiny bit, and I twiddled her ring finger, and she agreed that she was going to come see me in Sheffield. the next weekend. Seemed like a date. She almost appeals to a shepherdess. Our only music would be the bleating sheep. The stars would be our light. If you would come with me before we'd sleep, we would outdance the night. And when our hourglass, the sky, turned red and the cock began to crow, we'd use the uncut grass to make a bed and lie in the meadow. The evening would approve our waking. Things and times, both night and day, would provide for our love, if I could sing, for you to come away. I ran all the way to the train station to meet her. We went to the gay building, Dempsey's. She was a little colder than I expected. We got very drunk. We danced, but she didn't seem to want to dance closely. Eventually, she told me she decided it wasn't a good idea. I said I thought it was. I was very persistent. Eventually, we kissed in the taxi home. She let me go down on her, and we both fell asleep in my single bed. The next morning was awkward. I felt I'd done wrong. I felt abashed. We both wore plaid shirts. We went to the pub and drank cider and agreed we would never do or talk about this again. After the harvest, there is no one around. In empty fields, the grapevine bends to my mouth. Its fruit is sweet, but the starlings have left it alone. The clouds, too, have flown away to the south. The empty streams reflect an emptier sky. Even the bees have gone. A solitary drone crawls along a petal, waiting to die. The hay is gathered up. Somehow I missed the harvest dances. Now the meadows are mown, and gone with the mowers, the girls I never kissed. Where I lived in Sheffield was not a well-off area. It was all old workers' cottages, and the biggest business nearby was one that sold the original fixtures and fittings out of these homes to rich people as antique scrap. It was always rainy, cloudy. You walked up and up and up to get to it, but then the road levelled off, running straight like a plateau for almost a mile, until it suddenly dropped off steeply. Walking along the plateau, it looked like you were at the end of the world, walking towards the edge. I lived right at the end of the road, just over the edge. It seemed appropriate, but I wasn't staying. She resolves to leave Arcadia. And now the rains arrive. Unreal Arcadia, goddess, everywhere, turns out more real than I can bear. I tried to feel what you're supposed to feel, but nothing's as my hopes, my curse, had promised. A child of nature and time, I thought, caught up in the sublime, I'd rise with dawn and speak in verse, and live on berries and songs, all chaste, in love with beauty. So many mistakes. The ground is hard, my body aches. I'm sick of hedgerow fruit. Its taste is sharper than its thorns. My dreams confuse me. Clouds hide the moon at night. By day it's mists. So much for sight, where everything is how it seems. I left Sheffield. I moved to Manchester, more bustling, much gayer, and rented a flat near the Gay Street. You know, that's the Gay Street from the British Queer as Folk, if any of you have seen that. One night at a party, I started flirting with this girl. Everybody got high, and we ended up sleeping in a bed together, kissing some, cuddling all night. We didn't fuck, but we agreed to go on a date. We went on a date. I wore a shirt and tie and eyeliner, trying to dress like a lesbian. It seemed to go well. We got drunk. It seemed like we were going to sleep together. I decided, because I never learned, to tell her I was trans. She thought I meant I was planning to become a guy. When she understood what I really meant, her face fell. We did still have sex, but in the morning she told me it wasn't going to work out. I borrowed her Firefly DVD box set and never gave it back. She ended up dating a cis dude who was a real asshole. Her peroration. A hapless poet, trifling with Eros. I stand, O senators and knights, stuttering before you, at a loss, mumbling about rural delights. A babbling stream, a woodland grey glade, the radiance of the morning dew. I think my lyre is out of key. Call this a show? If I were you, I'd jeer and lob some fruit at me and chase me off, fee unpaid. Go home, eat dinner, make love to your maid. Thank you.